All right, everybody, welcome back to Overcome Babylon. And today joining me in the $1 billion studio is none other than Cyrus Harding. So it's a real pleasure. Thank you for joining us for this episode. And for those listening, just go ahead and give us a little bit of your background, Cyrus, as to really, you have such a fascinating, I guess what you would say, a portfolio of life experiences. You've kind of been there and done that. You haven't just read about geopolitics, you've lived through geopolitics, and a lot of a lot of things that people, I think, would benefit greatly from hearing, which is why I invited you to the podcast and why we scheduled this interview a few days ago and I haven't been able to really sleep. I was like, oh, I'm so excited to have Cyrus on, man. So go ahead and tell the listeners, a little bit about yourself.
Well, when I got my draft notice, I didn't want to go in the Army, so I went and enlisted in the Air Force. And lo and behold, I found one of the only jobs in the Air Force that they do for the Army, so I spent a lot of time with the Army. But anyway, I was trained as a Vietnamese linguist, interpreter, translator, interrogator, and then sent to Southeast Asia and did a tour there. Actually did a little more. And then I volunteered for Hebrew training, all this taking place at the Defense Language Institute in Monterey. And they asked me to reconsider and go into advanced Vietnamese because they were going to send us back to look for American POWs and MIAs. So I did. And while we were released for Christmas vacation and then came back, we found out Congress had declared there's no POWs. So the program was done away with. So I missed my Hebrew and I got put into Arabic. And I was a mean Arabic student because I wanted to be in Hebrew. And but I ended up learning it. And now I'm really beginning to understand why, because I primarily was an Egyptian linguist, but I also did Lebanese, Palestinian, Syrian, just 12 other dialects besides Egyptian. And so I worked in the Middle East 4 years, and I got to take part in some things like the fall of Tehran, also the Sinai Peace Treaty, which later became known as the Camp David Peace Accords. But anyway, I got to participate at a low level at in some of these events. And finally, I was sent to headquarters NSA, which is 35 miles north of Washington, D.C. And actually got to take part in some briefings of high-ranking officials, the president, things of that nature about the hostage crisis, since that was kind of placed in my lap.
Wow.
So the only bad thing is that this was 8 years in and Jimmy Carter was starving the military to death. So I got out, having a family. I went in the military, had a family.
Oh, so you joined the Army, not out of high school, I'm assuming. You joined a little later in life?
Yeah, well, just a little bit out of high school, yeah. See, what had happened is I had a really good job as a welder out of high school. In fact, I quit at the end of my junior year because I had such a good, steady stream of work. So anyway, when I turned 18, they gave me my draft number. It was number 60. And so I thought, that's pretty low. So anyway, I joined rather than go into the Army. But like I said, I spent most of my time with the Army.
That's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. And then I got out and I had my own business as an electrical contractor. And in 1989, I was on my way to California for a job. I'd already had an interview and stopped to see my brother in Dallas. And he said, well, why don't you look for a job here in Texas? They're building a super collider here. Of course, my question is, what was a super collider? Yeah, well, I found out because I was the 40th person hired and I was the fourth to last person fired. I stayed there for 8 years working with engineers and scientists on the super collider project itself. So it was a very good education. I mean, really good education. From there, I've done work with the state of Texas, Texas National Research Laboratory Commission. Um, I was responsible for all public schools in New Mexico, K through 12, things of that nature, maintenance. Uh, so I've done, like you said, I've had kind of a diverse background. It's all been engineer related, except for the military. Um, and most of that was with computers and electronic equipment, things of that nature. And that's why I hate computers today.
Yeah, I mean, well, when you do something for a living, sometimes that takes away from even wanting to do it in your free time, right?
Yeah, that's
Uh,
like the mechanic's car that doesn't run right, or the carpenter's roof that leaks. Yeah.
exactly. So, we were speaking privately the other day, and you mentioned some really interesting things. How did you I have a lot of questions, but let's just start with the NSA. How did you become involved with the NSA? Was that during your military career?
Yes,
That you,
they recruited me. Um, when you go in, you take a battery of tests, and I scored very high on several of the tests. So they recruited me while I was still in basic training. Um, I don't remember now what it was. I think I scored a 182 on the IQ test, and they gave me another level of test, and I even passed the Air Force officers qualification test. They didn't ever make me an officer, but I passed the test. But yes, they recruited me while I was still in boot camp.
oh wow. Oh wow. So are you able to discuss kind of some of the things you did with the NSA? Um, or is that all kind of classified stuff?
No, um, I can discuss it in a general sense, in a general term. Primarily, we would locate enemy targets and then vector in aircraft and blow them up. That was now that wasn't necessarily all we did. That was just, oh yeah, if you just happen to find somebody, let us know and we'll blow them up. And that's what I
Hmm.
did.
Okay. And
Now with Arabic, it was quite a bit different. Um, we were monitoring communications for almost every nation in the Middle East and North Africa. Uh,
around what time frame?
this is in the 70s.
70s. Okay.
Yeah, 70s. So there was a lot going on in the 70s. We just were not actively engaged. There was no kinetic warfare going on at that time. But we were actively engaged in Saudi Arabia and also the negotiations with Egypt, between Egypt and Israel. Um, President Sadat was a president at that time, and he was a wonderful man, a brilliant man, and a very, believe it or not, he was a very unassuming man. And he didn't even have what you would call an Air Force One. He would fly business class. Uh,
Hmm.
that's just the way he was. But I thought he was a very good leader. He was very far thinking, and that's why people couldn't understand what a victory it was to sign this peace treaty with Israel. And unfortunately, it cost him his life. But like I say, he was a very brilliant man.
Wow. And with your work and your experiences, obviously been exposed to a lot of things that us civilians. I've never served in the military. I tried, but anyways, long story short, it didn't work out. It's funny. I tried to join as an officer in the Air Force, but it didn't work out. I passed the test, but they didn't want me. So um, I would have gotten out this year actually had I gone through with it.
Oh,
So
okay.
it would have been interesting. But anyways, so with your background, you've been exposed to a lot of things. Do you think the NSA, the reason that they recruited you is because of all the different languages you speak? And how many languages do you speak, by the way?
Well,
Or
I'm
at
working
least,
on English. I'm trying to work on that more. At one time, I was trained in 6 languages.
Mm,
I spoke derivatives and dialects of those primary language groups. Um, but the last language I learned was Spanish, and it was the first one I forgot. Um,
mm.
it there's just no way I can keep the languages separate. They kind of cross barriers now. So I'll try to say something in Spanish because we have a lot of young people here in this area that are Hispanic, and I'll try to say something, and then it'll get mixed up with Vietnamese or Arabic or French or something else. So anyway,
Yeah.
they take pity on me. They do.
Uh, well, that's interesting. Yeah. So, man, so many questions for you. You mentioned in your blog, which it's codgerville.wordpress.org, correct? Or .com?
Dot
Yeah.
com.
Codgerville. I'll put a link in the description so everybody can check out, Cyrus's work. You mentioned in there that you have witnessed the economic collapse of 4 different countries. Can you kind of describe what you saw and how that kind of happened?
Well, we pulled out is what happened. Um, Seen participated in the rescue in Phnom Penh, um, also Saigon, Vientiane, Laos, and it's very chaotic. A lot of people died needlessly, um, but it was not as stupid as what took place in Afghanistan. I saw just a few clips and I couldn't watch anymore because that brought back too
Right.
many bad memories. But yes, when things get bad, people will kill to try to stay alive. And I've seen 85-pound Vietnamese women push people off the side of a building so she could get on a helicopter, with her baby. So when things collapse, all rules are off. There's no politeness, there's no morals, there's no nothing. It's chaos.
Wow.
That's why we're coming into an important time in history because I anticipate we're going to see something like that here in America.
Yes. And that's obviously, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about that. I have some questions for you, especially with your perspective. But you mentioned Vietnam, Laos. Did you mention what was the first location? Was it Cambodia?
Cambodia,
Yeah,
Cambodia,
Cambodia.
yeah,
Yep. And then what was the fourth one that you also
Iran,
experienced?
Iran,
Tehran?
yeah.
Okay. Wow. And I guess how did you end up in those scenarios to begin with? Was it just because of your work with the military?
Yes, primarily. Also, it was my work as a linguist. They could have a linguist on ground to help people. So there were about 40 of us that tried to work. Now, in Southeast Asia, there there might have been 20 of us, and then in the Middle East, North Africa, there were about 40 of us that did that kind of work, um, primarily for NSA. But since we were in the military moves our bodies around for NSA. But believe it or not, even when things are falling, you're collecting intelligence.
Mm,
Okay, so somebody's learning something from this collapse, and they want
okay.
all the intelligence that they can get. Want every bird's eye view, every perspective. There was just chaos in Vietnam, chaos in Cambodia. Vientiane was not as bad, but in Laos, POJ, the Plain of Jars, that was not as bad because those were more disciplined soldiers, mercenaries there. But civilians in Phnom Penh and Saigon, a lot of chaos, a lot of killing.
Yeah. So really, what you're saying is during this time period, these collapses really transpired because we, as the United States, supporting a lot of the basically activity going on in the area, we decided to just withdraw troops in a pretty quick fashion, right? Is that
Yeah,
kind of how?
yeah.
Yeah.
We had to. We were now. Remember, the war ended. Technically, the peace treaty was signed in January of 1973. So we were not at war. We had a peace treaty, but only you could only have so many American advisors in Vietnam after the treaty.
Hmm.
So what they would do is stick us in Thailand and then fly us over to Vietnam, and we haven't moved inner theater. You see, we weren't coming from the States going into Vietnam because that took permission to get people in. But since we were already in Southeast Asia, it was just a convenient hop for a helicopter. So anyway, that's how we ended up getting pulled to do all that double duty.
Okay. And I'm just out of curiosity, someone listening might not totally understand what a linguist does. I'm not sure I completely understand, although I have a pretty good idea. But were you in interpret? You're not an interpreter. You're more like,
I,
what was the
I
role?
was I was trained to be an interpreter, an interrogator, which is interpreting with prejudice, and then translator, analyst in that language. Um, I mean, you have to have the mindset, and that has proven valuable for me in studying the scripture
Hmm.
because it means something different to me because I know the culture a lot better than people who have never lived in the Middle East.
Yes, yes.
The Semitic culture is completely different than the United States. I don't care what part you're from, it's a totally different culture. And so that has really helped. And one of the other languages that I did learn was Aramaic. And so I came in through a back door into the study of scripture through Aramaic.
Wow.
And that was really beneficial to me. So, once again, yes, to interpret, you have to understand the nuances of the language, idioms, and things of that nature.
Wow.
And they play a big role in your translation. So, one of my favorite sayings to use as an example is calf rope. If you come to Texas and see two kids fighting on the school ground, and one of them throws another one to the ground and gets his arm behind his back, and he says, "Say it, say it." He says, "Okay, calf rope." It's like saying uncle. Okay,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
so that's and if you don't know that, and you see these two kids fighting, and you're going to record it and write it down, what are you going to do? Are you going to say, "Well, he said calf rope"? Well, that's what he said actually, but it doesn't mean calf rope. It means like uncle. I give, I surrender. Okay, and so that's a nuance that you have to know, or you won't understand the whole situation.
Wow. And you said something, we were speaking, you said something to me recently. You said that in where you were in Lebanon, you actually were able to learn Aramaic, but the ancient form that actually pertains to biblical times. Is that correct?
Yes, it goes back. It's the people are Zoroastrian,
Hmm.
uh, and so they have pretty well maintained the language from that period of time. It's like Arabic. There's one Arabic, modern standard Arabic, and all Arabs can pretty well communicate using modern standard Arabic because that's the Arabic that's in the Quran. So that's their unifying principle. But then once they get their message across, they'll go back speaking in their own dialect. And
Huh.
so it's not something they use to communicate with their friends and loved ones. It's something that they use to communicate from one nation to another.
Okay.
Kind of like in English, we could understand someone in Great Britain. They would have difficulty understanding us, but we could make ourselves understood. Okay, it's just we've deviated so far from British
Mm-hmm.
English that we really do have a separate dialect of American, and then look at all the subgroups in
Right.
America.
Then you got the South.
Exactly where I'm
So,
from.
so Cyrus, segueing a little bit. So, how does somebody like you, working for the military industrial complex to a large extent, you said you were in the Department of Energy doing some things.
Yes.
How did you discover God? Like, when did God touch your heart? How did God come into the equation? Where did you start to understand there's
Well,
this need for the Most High of the Bible?
yeah, I'll talk about that because I was raised in a Southern Baptist home.
Okay.
So my sister, would point to the words in the Bible and tell me what they were. So I actually could read, the Bible before I even went to school because of my sister. Uh, it was uh, God was a part of our life.
Okay.
I made a decision at 9 that I believed in Jesus and walked down the aisle and was baptized. Um, I was later ordained a Baptist minister after I got out of the military, and my two boys were actually baptized in the same church I was. And I was married in that church. It was a part of our life.
Oh, I see. I wasn't
Uh,
aware of that. Okay.
Now, my desire to get an education relative to Scripture came in 1978. Um, I had I was kind of like Shaul. I was a captive audience, and for 3 days and 3 nights, nobody could rouse me, lift me out of bed, or anything.
Hmm.
So for 3 days and 3 nights, I I had some learning to do. And so when I got out, when I left, I'll take that back. I even started Bible college while I was overseas. Um, but anyway, I started Bible college in 78, 79. Went to Washington Bible College. And there I met a fascinating man, Dr. G.A. Miles. And he was teaching the book of Hebrews. And we had to draw uh, the Holy of Holies on a map. That was part of our project. And I made this statement to something to the effect, why do we have to do this if all that was done away with? And he says, are you sure? It's like, well, I was till you asked. So all of a sudden, yeah, I'd known God all my life and known Jesus too, but now I was learning who Jehovah was.
Hmm.
And so over the next 40 plus years, that has been where I have tried to put most of my time. But it was really after the death of my youngest son that I began to draw closer to the Creator, and in doing so, it changed my life. It really did, and that was back in 1998. So it was a growing process. It took me 20 years to go from going to school in a Christian school to actually learning who it was that spoke to me. And so know his name, I'll put it that way. And so it was a very long period of growth for me because you have to get the Greek out. I mean, you can't lay the foundation of Hebrew on top of Greek. It doesn't work. And I tried to build on what I had already known, and that's hard. That's a mistake. I now know that because I think it was in 2012, I was praying just almost every day, more than once a day, to please get the Greek out. Because, in fact, I used to live in Greece. And so it was another culture for me. But Greek is a linear thought process, Hebrew is cyclical. Okay. And Hebrew, Arabic, Farsi, Aramaic, they're all cyclical in nature. And if you start trying to, that's why when people do Daniel 9 timelines, they do straight lines. That's not it. It's a cycle. the whole thing, this whole creation is a cycle. Okay. And that's when I had started doing cycles a little bit prior to that, about 2000, when I started doing cycles, 2002. And so I've been at it for about 20 years. But that was part of me coming out of Christianity and getting the linear thinking out, and now inserting the cycle. And all of a sudden, it's like, wow, there's cycles everywhere. I can see them, and it's I don't know. To me, it's very obvious, but a lot of
It,
folks say,
yeah, when I there's a lot of contradictions in my brain that ultimately led me to leave Christianity, and one of them was this idea of dispensationalism, like God works
yes,
in these different
yes,
time periods totally differently. Like one,
yes,
there's he's all about law, and the other one he's all about grace, and the other one he doesn't care about this. He's like, but then you look
yeah.
at the Word of God and it says he never changes,
He never
right?
changed. That's it.
So I
So
think anybody who's going to be really, really, objective and honest with themselves, you have to see like something has gone wrong with Western theology, and we're seeing the
yes,
consequences of that right now in our world,
yes,
which
that's correct.
it's something that we're going to basically transition into next, because you mentioned Daniel 9, which has been a huge focus of this podcast. Daniel 9 has been huge. We've been talking about the 70 Shabbat. In order to understand the 70 Shabbat of his prophecy, you have to understand the 120 Shane, which is
That's
another
correct.
way of saying Shabbat, the 120 Shabbat of mankind.
Yeah.
And in order to
They
understand
both
that,
mean cycle of time is all they mean. The cycle of time is what they're really right. That's correct.
exactly right. And you talk about this in your blog, and I really appreciate your insights on it as well. And one verse that jumps to mind immediately is Isaiah 46:10, right? That Elohim, the Most High Elohim, he declares the end from the very beginning. And that's
That's
exactly what
correct.
he did with Genesis 6:3. We're like, okay, 120, my spirit shall not strive with man forever, but his days shall be 120 Shane. And then we look, okay, well, what is Shane? And then you start digging into this. Leviticus 25:8, if I'm not mistaken, is where we see the definition of the 49 counting, the counting of one 49-year period. And then
Right.
all of a sudden it all clicks. And so with that, now that you have basically just gone through this transformation, this journey that God has taken you throughout your whole life, and here we are in the last days, and I've learned so much from you, from Joseph Dumont, who obviously, I'm a big fan of his work. There's men that I've learned, so many great things from. What are you kind of looking at? What are some things that are sticking out to you now in this final revolution of time from 1996 to 2044? What are some of the things that really catch your eye?
Gosh, there's a lot.
I know there's a lot. How about from
Yeah.
2022, which we're in right now, moving forward? What are you kind of foreseeing? What's kind of on the forecast? Does that make sense?
Well, for me, it's I guess more selfish in that way. I'm concerned about America, um, and people say that America is not mentioned in Scripture. I can accept that, but I don't believe it. And so I'm looking for disaster to befall America. A lot of people are going to die, uh, but they're going to die worldwide as well. War, I hate war. I don't want to see war. Another one for sure. But this one's going to be much different. Uh, and I think it's going to be so fast, it's going to scare people um, that they may not even some people in America won't even realize that America's gone to war before it's over with. Um,
Hmm.
it's going to be very kinetic. It's hard to describe what I see taking place, but after getting through war, America is going to go into slavery. It'll be if the Chinese take America, most Americans will be slaughtered. Um, they'll either die outright or they'll just be worked to death. And the idea that they'll do like the Germans did in World War II, no, it'll be much worse than that. In fact, one general, Chinese general, said the only thing that Germans did wrong in World War II is that they were too nice. we're not going to be that nice. We're going to be ruthless. So that's what they're planning for, you see.
I did hear that clip. I believe that was on Epic Times. I believe that's where it was first dropped. Yeah, they want to be more ruthless than Hitler was.
Yes, that's correct. They don't want us here. We're useless eaters as far as they're concerned. And they want the natural resources, they want the farmland, and they've got 1.4 billion people they cannot feed. So that's why they're going around the world buying up foodstuffs all around the world. They have years of food put away, but when you go to war, it's going to go fast. And so I just have a contrarian view of how the war will take place than most people. If you look at it from an American point of view, going to war with America is impossible.
Mm-hmm.
But if you stand outside the box and you look in, it's like you're in a gap right now for the next 4 years. Even if you do everything right, you're still in that gap. And so I know Russia and China are looking at us thinking it's time. It's not yet, but it's getting close time to go in and take America and eliminate our biggest problem. They want to do
Yeah,
away with the debt-based system.
Bretton Woods. I've mentioned this in the podcast. The ruble is a commodities backed, gold backed, 5,000 rubles for 1 gram of gold.
Yep.
The ruble is becoming the BRICS currency, and I know Russia and China are eventually going to clash. They're eventually going to be at war with each other later on.
Yep, they will.
But here's my thing, right? And you already addressed it. You said, from an American standpoint, and this is more or less the sentiment. We have a military that's so powerful. We have all these weapons. We have all this capability. There's no way Russia and China can mess with us. How would you respond to that?
They don't even know what bathroom to go to. Okay. They don't know. And I'm not trying to be mean or anything, but I'm not playing this gender game. There is a man dressed like a woman who is an admiral in the United States Navy. Well, now he's some kind of, I think, undersecretary of at the Pentagon, or he might be at the State Department, but he was an admiral. But it's a he dressed as a woman and long hair, and this is not going to impress anybody. It's not going to scare anybody. When you are facing an enemy and you can size them up, then you say, man, these are tough looking guys. These are men and women. Like the Viet Cong were both men and women. There was no sex barrier there. And so you have this mutual respect for fighting man. And they look at us and it's like, boy, did somebody wake up on the wrong side of the morning, of the bed. Because they laugh at all this gender teaching going on in the military. It's just ridiculous. They see all this stuff. They see it. So they know what's going on in the American military. We do have good soldiers, airmen, sailors, Marines, but the command structure is it's crazy. It's crazy.
So essentially, and this is what you're pointing at, is that the moral decay and the absolute, basically lawless thinking, the lawlessness, the moral corruption, people tend to look at, oh, well, we have guns, we have this, we have all these different capabilities, but they're ignoring the spiritual aspect, which is actually, if you read the Bible, which, we become kind of this, perverted agnostic atheist society in general. I'm speaking in general of the American people and the West. But we tend to look at war as like, oh, it's who's got the stuff. The basically, I call them idols, the idols of the military industrial complex, rather than, what's the righteousness, what's the moral condition of the people? Because, like you said, you give, all these weapons that we've had in our possession, nuclear weapons, all these things, and the control of these things over to an admiral or just to somebody who's on hormone blockers or whatever, and it's not going to end well, right?
No.
And
no.
Uh, so
Yeah.
yeah, I really agree with you on that big time. And
You know,
it's so neglected. The moral aspect of war is so neglected. The spiritual aspect, totally not even talked about. But what do you, so you basically in my view, and I'm sure a lot of other people as well, you're like one of the unofficial experts of cycles, right?
I'm right here at the front. This is my office, but it's right here at the front door. So there's a lot of noise sometimes.
That's okay. So what I was asking is you're basically like the unofficial expert in cycles. And I know you've influenced my work. I'm sure you've, blessed other people with your insights as well. Can you start to break down a little bit about the how do solar and lunar eclipses, how do blood moons, how do all these things kind of fit into the overall picture? And let's just start with, for example, what was the significance of the May 15th, 16th blood moon that we just saw, a couple months ago? What was the significance of that? And how do blood moons even, how do they work? What do they do? What do they mean? I think that's a big question a lot of people have these days.
Well, let me do it this way. I don't know what they mean per se. I know what I look at them and see where are they pointing? Who is seeing this blood moon? And I look at it and say, wait a minute, that was for America. It was North and South America saw this blood moon. So I believe this is my belief, opinion. I believe that that was basically a warning that our turn was coming, to get ready because uh, something's coming. I hate to use the word judgment because it may not be judgment. It
Hmm.
may just be the full effect of the next cycle, is how I look at it. See, we're just exited a cycle on June 29th, and it did not terminate because the magnetosphere of the Earth is so low that there's this ambient background, if you want to call it noise, that's coming in from the sun, the moon, uh, all the cosmic radiation that the sun would normally block. And then, the corona of the sun blocks radiation from hitting us from outside of our solar system. But even the sun's corona has come in a great deal. I think it was overall like 200,000 or 300,000 miles smaller than what it used to be. But anyway, uh, these systems that Jehovah has put here to protect us have done a very good job. And right now, because of the cycles of the moon and the sun and the earth, these systems are going down to a very low point. And I say
Hmm.
systems, the group, who really knows where gravity comes from? Who really understands gravity? Okay, who understands where the magnetosphere comes from? Most scientists believe it's a product of the electromagnetic field being generated inside the Earth. They don't know, but they think that that might be where it comes from, where the Van Allen radiation belt comes from. All of these unanswered questions, and all I can do is try to observe them and use them in calculating what I call noise, which is really what it is we're being bombarded with radiation that we normally would not be bombarded with. And now we're actually being hit by X rays and UV, alpha, beta, and gamma are actually one, two, and three. Um, Different scientists use different terms, but we're getting three levels of UV instead of one. And we're in recorded history, we've never been hit by X-rays at the level that it's coming through. So
Wow.
our bodies are literally going to change because of the radiation.
So is that why when I'm working outside pouring concrete that I'm just like feeling so miserable like I've never felt in my life before?
Yes. And see, I don't know how old you are, but I'm guessing you've never seen a truly yellow sun at high noon. See, I grew up under a yellow sun most of my life. Working outdoors, we're either working on the farm or working outdoors. Um, Definitely in the military, the sun was yellow at high noon. It's not white. It wasn't white when I was growing up.
Hmm.
But now you can't even see the sun. It's so bright white that it makes it impossible. It hurts your eyes to even try to look at it.
One thing I noticed, you seen it the past 3 nights, okay? The at night the moon, especially the last full moon, it's been yellowish and like or almost an orangish red. Not a
Yeah,
blood moon, but what is that
right.
part of what you're talking about here as well?
I'm not sure, Abraham. I'm really not sure. Um, you know, it could be that there is some particulate matter. There's about 6 or 8 volcanoes erupting in Central America and South America. So maybe it could be particulate matter up in the upper atmosphere, stratosphere. I don't know. But yes, and a lot of people noticed, and some people didn't. What year was that? It was about 2013, somewhere around 2012, 2013. The moon was not the same man in the moon face that it used to be. The moon was canted to one side, okay, and
Like
then it
tilted?
went back. Huh? Tilted,
Like
yes, yes. And the Inuit people who live around the Arctic Circle in North America and Greenland even went to the UN and said, look, the night sky has changed. We're not looking at the same things we used to look at for thousands of years. Something has happened to the night sky, and we have a prophecy about when this happens. That's close to the end of this creation, and the next creation comes. So they went to the UN with that message. So there's a
okay.
lot of things going on that can't be explained, and most people are just ignorant of. You
Yeah.
know, people don't want to even step outside and look up at the sky anymore.
Well, and that's see again, that's another thing that comes from the wisdom of understanding the Torah, which again, first 5 books of the Bible, Yeshua came and you say, hey, it's also the Moses, the prophets, but and Psalms and things in the writings. But when you understand, the requirements of Torah and like, hey, you got to look for the sighted moon, you got to look for the sliver, and you have to understand when a
Right.
month begins and when a month ends. You have to understand it. That's actually for me when my life started changing. That's why this whole idea of cycles it just appealed to me so easily and readily because I was like, whoa, okay, there's something that God's showing us every single month of the year.
Right.
Everybody's like, oh, if there's a God, right? I'm talking about the atheist or agnostic. Uh, if there's a God, how come he doesn't show himself? I'm like, well, he's showing us signs all the time.
Exactly.
Uh, it's just people aren't paying attention. But I guess with that said, you pointed, I remember when I first started looking into this topic of cycles, what books or what works would you recommend? I know there's Edward R. Dewey,
Yes,
Cycles.
Edward Dewey. Also, another very good book is Dr. Stephen Pitt's, Puetz. It's called The Unified Cycle Theory. Those 2 books right there are very, very powerful. That's what got me going.
Yeah.
I was really trying to figure out why people go nutty during 3 days of the month, during the full moon. And then it led into all of this other stuff.
And that actually leads me into something I wanted to ask you about. So what you're saying is that are you saying somewhere around 2012, 2013 is when we started seeing a difference? There was a shift in the amount of radiation in our atmosphere. Would you say it was around that time period or different?
It was around that time period because most of these changes started about the time of Comet Ison. When Comet Ison was coming through our solar system, I don't know if you remember it, but when it flew
Mm-mm.
past Mars, there was an electrical discharge between the two that caused Mars's atmosphere to glow. So for a period of a few hours, Mars actually was glowing. Okay. Now this discharge, I believe personally, it's just me, but I believe a comet, and it may have been the planet Venus. The comet went past the Earth, and this static discharge took place between the Earth and this comet, which I believe was the planet Venus, or is now the planet Venus. This discharge took place, and that's how the Grand Canyon was formed. I don't believe it took 200 million years. I believe it took 2 seconds, 200 seconds, 20 seconds. I believe it was carved out because of this electromagnetic charge between two bodies in very close proximity, going through the solar system.
That makes a lot of sense. Here's what I'm seeing, okay? And I want you to kind of chime in here, because we're told in Matthew 24 that things are getting so chaotic with the atmosphere, with the sun and the moon being darkened, and these types of events, that if these days that we're going into are not shortened, no flesh would survive. No flesh is going to survive.
Correct.
What's coming, but for the sake of the chosen, the elect, God's people, those days are going to be shortened. When I hear things like this, like, hey, yeah, I think this is how the Grand Canyon was carved out, I'm like, wow, that's the kind of stuff that, like, who would survive that kind of an event? You know what I mean? And it just,
that's correct.
So basically, are we going to be starting to see some cosmic events, bigger ones taking place in the next couple of years?
Yes, much bigger. I believe that things in 2024 are going to get so powerful, so intense, that literally lightning will shoot up from the earth into outer space. It's done it in the past, and I have 1 or 2 pictures of it, but it's not common. I believe it's going to be very common.
Wow.
And what is happening is we're getting miniature convergences taking place, because everybody's rotating at a different speed around the sun, and every once in a while you'll get planets in a line. And I think it was April, it might have been March, I saw it right out my front door here. It was about 5:30 in the morning. Now, the glow of the sun was still on the other side of the earth, but it was starting to glow off in the east. And there was Mercury. Just past Mercury was Venus. Just past Venus was the moon, representing the earth, because we couldn't see the earth, remember? Okay, so the moon was right there after Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and Neptune, all in a straight line. Now, this happened again on, it was photographed in Australia, I want to say in June. The same event took place on the southern hemisphere that had taken place in, I want to say it was April, if I'm not mistaken. But
we're talking 20, this year, right? This Gregorian year, 2022, correct?
Yes, that's correct. That's correct. Now, 2024 is when the largest planets in our solar system will be in line with the Earth and the Sun, which is going to put a great deal, and Mars is going to be just out of line, but it's a very small planet. That puts a great deal of stress on the Earth. What I believe, and I believe I can prove it, but let's just say that Jupiter is not really a planet, but rather a red dwarf star. It was the second star of a binary solar system. The current sun that we have now was not the most important sun. It was Jupiter. There's only one planet that matches up with the equator of the sun, and that's Mercury. All the rest of the planets match up with the equator of Jupiter. Okay, this is fact. You can go and research this on your own. The composition of Jupiter is only 2 percentage points different in helium than an active star. Okay, the hydrogen, the helium, or the hydrogens is exact. The helium is 2 percentage points off, and then some of the other noble gases, but they're metallic. It's so dense that when it collapsed, it metallicized the gases. Why did it collapse? Because it did a nova. I believe the nova was the event Jehovah used to destroy the earth. That nova was so powerful that it just undid everything on the earth. But if it wasn't that particular event, then I believe it is what happened between Genesis 1:1 and 1:2 that destroyed everything that had been made perfect. And then it became void and without form.
I
Okay.
appreciate that. I appreciate that because to me, in my brain, there's something there, and no one's ever really given me an explanation of, okay, he created the heavens and the earth, but why is it full of void and waste?
Exactly.
It doesn't make any sense. There's
Yeah.
something went on, and I
A
think that's a
destruction
plausible
took
explanation. I
place.
appreciate that. That's good. Yeah.
Yeah. And Jeremiah speaks about it just a little bit right around Jeremiah 4, I think it's 25, 26, 27, 28. Right in there, he talks about when the earth was void and without form, that there was no flesh. Okay. So that's not the flood of Noah and his family, because there were 8 that were saved. This other, all the cities were destroyed, and there was no man left. So
Wow.
that's okay. So there's a little bit of a
That's
clue there.
interesting. Yeah. What chapter and verse is that again? Sorry. Real quick.
Jeremiah 4, somewhere between 25 and 28. If you look
Okay.
there, you'll see it.
I'll make a note of that. I'm gonna check
Okay.
that out. Absolutely. And so, with all this being said, like cosmic, astronomical events are not things to be ignored. How does World War III fit into your equation, into your analysis, just based off of the cycles and everything that you're seeing in the heavens?
Well, it fits because of the super cycle. We're coming up into a super cycle September 26th. Well, 26th to 28th, whenever the moon is sighted. Okay. That will be, let's see, that'll be on Teruah, if I'm not mistaken.
Pretty close, yeah.
Yeah. So, in fact, in the Hillel calendar, the 26th, I think, is the Yom Teruah. I go by the sighted moon, so it'll be whenever we sight it, probably the 28th or 29th. I'm not sure. And this cycle is a war cycle. And, I had really given up doing cycles until you contacted me, and it's like, I don't know if I want to do that. And, but when I looked at the cycle, you were asking me questions about it, and I looked at the cycle, and it's like, oh my gosh, this is huge, because last year, calendar year 2021, we had 2 cycles. The first cycle was a top down on the Arctic. The second cycle, which was in the fall, was a bottom up Antarctic. And then to start out this year, the first one was bottom up Antarctic, and the next one coming up is a top down. So it's just exactly what happened last year, but in reverse order.
Wow.
And
What are the odds of something like that happen by chance?
I don't know. I've never seen it that way. I've never seen it that way. So here's the thing. This one was a financial cycle. I knew I could see it. It was, sometimes the numbers just jump off the page. And it was a financial cycle. And I told everybody it was. Like Brother Joe had said, well, you were talking about Russia and Ukraine in the last cycle. I said, I know I was, because that was a perfect fit. I could see that was Russia was going to war with Ukraine, but it didn't happen. But it didn't happen because the swamp between Belarus and Ukraine had not frozen, because they had abnormally high temperatures this past winter. And they could not get their tanks and equipment across that swamp until it froze, and it didn't have good, solid freezing weather until January and February. So they attacked in February. So I don't control the weather. Just read the cycles. Jehovah controls the weather. So anyway, this cycle coming up, starting on the 26th of September, which I believe is a great possibility that it will begin with a financial event. Okay? War cycle, but I believe the war is going to start over a financial event. Then The lunar eclipse is October 25th. The peak of the cycle is November 1st.
Okay, so Cyrus, how do you determine? I wrote about this on my blog, overcomebabylon.com. But for those that aren't familiar, how do you define a super cycle and how do you define the peak of the cycle?
Okay. To have any intensity at all, they've got to be within 2 weeks of each other, solar and lunar.
Solar eclipse and lunar eclipse, right?
That's correct. Be within 2 weeks of each other. So the point that is directly between the two eclipses, that's your peak intensity. That's where it's built, and it won't go any higher. And it is going to radiate out in between the two cycles, two eclipses.
And you're referring to gamma radiation intensity, radiation in general intensity, or?
No, I probably chose the wrong word. It's going to influence for about a week and a half. Peak intensity is only going to last no more than 2 weeks.
Okay.
So if you look at the date, which would be October 25th for the lunar eclipse, November 8th for the solar eclipse, that whole period in there is very high. But the peak moment is going to be November 1st. That's the concentration, just simply because of the closeness of the eclipses. Okay, I don't understand all the mechanics that take place. I just know how to read it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it will drop off after 2 more weeks, and then it will probably disappear 2 weeks after that. This is not a really strong cycle because the solar eclipse is only 75%.
Well, it's not total.
Not total. It's not total. So you're not going to get the full effect of the eclipse. So, had said, it's still over 50, which is still a lot. And what happens, I don't know, but you can see it if you've ever watched the solar eclipse, when the moon pulls in front of the sun. When you look around the moon, that halo is a completely different color from the sun and from the moon.
Okay.
Okay, what it is doing is blocking your normal radiation by its presence and letting radiation that piggybacks on it, I guess is a good way of saying it. When the sun is throwing out radiation, some of the radiation gets lost because of the powerful UV rays, the infrared, things of that nature that a lot of it we don't see. But at the time of the eclipse, you can see a lot of that going around the moon, and that's what's hitting the Earth, and that's really one of the prime factors that influence people. And not long ago, I sent to Brother Joe and Brother Mark an article that came out that even if you're underground, you can't hide from these cycles. Okay, they're there. You're going to feel them. Everything that lives, not necessarily breathes, lives, feels those cycles.
Right.
Okay? Even plankton in a cave somewhere can feel the radiation going through it.
And so what you're saying is these cycles affect everything from war to economics, the stock market. They affect literally everything. And I'll never forget this, Cyrus. I don't know if I shared this with you, but because of your information, I don't recommend this to anybody in the audience because it's a dangerous, it's not a good game to play. I ended up getting a little burned out of it, to be honest. But I actually predicted the top of the Bitcoin cryptocurrency cycle during the last super cycle that we had. Well, I shouldn't say the very last one, but the one before that in November of 2021, because that was peak crypto. And then what happened? The Federal Reserve announced, hey, we're going to go ahead and start increasing interest rates. which, that tightens the money, that makes people less risk averse, more risk averse. They don't want to invest in risky things like stocks and crypto when the Federal Reserve is increasing the interest rates. So we actually, because of your information, you could have actually predicted the top of crypto, the top of Bitcoin, which is something that I did. And it was, I was blown away. I was like, whoa, he was dead on. This was so accurate. Again, we're not financial, advisors or whatever. I don't recommend the audience dabble with that stuff right now. That stuff is pretty much stay away from it. I mean, my goodness. Anyways, but I think you're saying some really interesting things. For all the listeners, I'm going to put a link in the description. If you want to go see all of NASA's forecasted lunar and solar eclipses, I will put a link in the description. It's from a NASA official website. I'll go ahead and drop that. It's kind of a weird GFCS, whatever. I forget the whole URL. So I'm just going to drop it in the description. And so what you're saying is on September 26th, we can go ahead and expect to see something happen. And you mentioned this to me, arising out of Central Asia. Can you explain more how you kind of came to that conclusion of Central Asia being basically the shot heard around the world?
Sorry? Yeah, that's very, very easy. You always look at where the intensity of the solar eclipse lands, okay? And it's landing in Central Asia. So using just basically the cycle pattern itself, something is going to come out of Central Asia. That's what I had told Brother Joe about COVID. I didn't know it was going to be COVID,
right?
But that something's coming out of China and it's going to go around the world and affect the whole world, and it's going to have an influence on the price of oil. Okay.
And you nailed
that. What did I expect? I thought it was going to obviously go up. Maybe, how do you say? No, I honestly think the price of oil is going to go down to about negative $38. I've never seen anything like that. But it definitely affected the price of oil, but it did it in a negative way. So people were literally having to pay somebody to store their oil. And it was negative $38. And yeah, I saw something come out of China, go around the world and influence oil. Did I get it completely right? No, I didn't, but I don't know anybody else that said, hey, look out, something's coming out of China.
Yeah, right. As far as I know, and I have followed a lot of people over the years. And again, when I first came across your information about 2 years ago, I was blown away about how accurate your predictions had been then, and now how accurate your predictions have been. And I know we use the word prediction kind of loosely. It's more of a forecast.
Forecast. That's exactly the way I say it. And weather forecasting, I can be as wrong as weather forecasting. Okay. So just think of it as a forecast. I'm looking at conditions like a meteorologist would look out in the Atlantic or the Gulf and say, wow, we could get a hurricane out of that storm that's out there. And it doesn't happen. It just goes away. Well,
right.
That's what I'm seeing. I see a potential storm in the future. A very strong probability that we could get a very bad storm somewhere in the next cycle or beyond into the 2023. I haven't looked at any cycle in 2023 yet. I want to see how close I get in my cycle forecasting so I can try to improve things into the next cycle. That's why I don't do, 2 or 3 years ahead of time, because I might be all wrong all 2 or 3 years.
Right. But, and you said also that the fact that the magnetosphere has collapsed and there's so much extra radiation, it's even hard for you.
Yeah, okay. Not completely, but it has collapsed so much that there's something happening all the time now. This background intensity of radiation hitting the Earth is equal to a cycle of 50%. And it's going to shrink even further. People, if you don't mind me saying it, people are going to go mad. Literally, they're going to go mad because there's so much bombardment of radiation continuously striking the Earth. People are just going to start going mad.
Well, and
Um,
we're told in Revelation that one of the horsemen of the apocalypse is, it's going to have a great sword, and people are going to start killing each other. I mean, this is something that, some people might have a different, like, oh, that already happened in the past sometime. But in my opinion, a lot of Revelation we have to yet to see. So
well, think about
that
the
might tie in.
grievous sore. Remember the grievous sore that people would have? That could be skin cancer. I don't know.
Oh,
I
yeah.
don't.
Well,
I'm
so
speculating. I'm speculating.
by the way, real quick, what is the magnetosphere? For people that may not be aware with that term, what that term is.
It is an outer band of electromagnetic energy outside our atmosphere, actually surrounding the Earth, protecting it from harmful radiation. That's what it
Okay.
does.
Yeah.
Jehovah stuck it there for that purpose, and it is, has protected mankind down through the centuries. But now it's dissipating. But it's not because of climate change or anything else. It's because of the cycle that we're in as far as the Earth and the Sun and the relationship between the two.
Okay. So
Roughly a
here's
600-year cycle.
I remember you said that you're a fan of Joel Skousen, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
and he was recently. This is really funny, actually. He was on a podcast with Canadian Prepper 3 days ago,
Okay.
and he originally, as far as I was aware, he said World War III and nuclear war, it's inevitable, but it's not going to happen until certainly after the year 2020, when China is more ready. Russia will be ready far before that, he said, but nuclear war is not going to happen until after 2020, but by 2023 it's an absolute certainty. But in this podcast he just did 3 days ago, I didn't realize that he changed his mind, and he's saying, okay, you know he's saying, and by the way, for people who aren't aware of Joel Skousen and his work, he's the only one that's been warning about nuclear war and how all the governments of the world are gearing up and getting ready for this event, building underground
Right.
bunkers. He's been warning about this on his blog, his website, for a long time. And what he's basically saying now, though, is, oh, from the year 2022 that we're in right now, he's saying, oh, Russia and China, they're not going to strike. They're not going to be ready for, I believe he said 3 to 5 more years.
Yeah.
So that puts us at 2025 to 2027. What would you have to say about that? Because, Joel doesn't understand what we're talking about with cycles, I don't think. And he certainly doesn't understand the prophetic elements of the 70 Shabbat. What would your response be to that?
Well, I definitely respect Joel's work because he builds and he teaches people how to build, survival places, survival shelters, survival homes. Um, he's a very, very smart man and another veteran combat pilot. So he's a very smart man. I followed him for a number of years. He's a nephew of Cleon Skousen, who was a great, great patriot. And I disagree because I, I think I know where Joel is coming from. And I'm looking at this as a different type of warfare. It will, he believes nukes will fly and there'll be a lot of destruction. And I don't think so. And another thing that I know he believes in is that the Chinese will use, or Chinese or Russians or both, will use a combination of EMPs, and those EMPs will disable everything in the United States. There's a flaw with that reasoning. Okay. If they use EMPs, that means 130 Fukushimas will take place in this country because the nuclear power plants that we have in this country will be unregulated at that point, and they can't automatically scram or shut down safely if they have no power. Okay, remember, an EMP will shut your car down, but it does such damage to the components of your car that you can't start it back up. So you have to replace all your electronic components. So if you have a car built in the 60s or the 50s or early 70s, you'll have to go get a new condenser and probably a new coil and maybe even a new alternator. Then if you have one that was built in the 70s through the 80s, you'll have to go get another control module. After the 90s, you're going to have to get computers, components and chips, and all of that will have to be changed. So there's advantages to driving an old car, other than the constant maintenance you have to do on it, because I do maintenance every day. But I
Yeah.
would disagree with Joel, because I see us even more vulnerable than I think he does. We have expended so much ordnance, given it to Ukraine, losing it in Afghanistan, and all these other useless wars that we've been fighting for the last 20 years. We've expended most of our ordnance. The Undersecretary for Acquisition for the Department of Defense, I think the lady's name is Hicks, I can't remember her first name, has warned Congress that for the next 2 to 4 years, we're in a gap where we can no longer replenish our stock of Stinger, Javelin, and other missiles and hardware, because not only do the companies that produced it, which Raytheon, Lockheed, I think Raytheon owns Lockheed too. But anyway, they not only don't have spare parts, but they don't even have the tooling to make spare parts. So if the president ordered tomorrow, start making more Javelin and Stinger missiles, then these companies would have to make the tooling that would make the spare parts. That's not a simple process. That's a 2-year process right there to produce all the tooling you need to produce the spare parts. Then it would take another 2 years of production to replenish our stock of missiles. So every time we send them Javelin, Stinger missiles, Harpoon missiles, we're using up our limited resources. They are shipping to Ukraine right now. They're shipping Vietnam era ammunition for the 50 caliber machine gun and other weapons, AR-15, 5.56, not modern manufactured, because they haven't been purchasing any lately. So if we had to supply a current contract with the military on a new batch of ammunition, it would take a minimum of 90 days to fulfill one batch. But now here's the kicker. They just approved a new weapon for the Army, and it doesn't use 5.56. It's a new ammunition that I think only 1 or 2 people make. So we're in a very bad sort right now. And what Putin is doing, and everybody's saying, well, the guy's just totally incompetent. Look, they could have gone in there and decapitated Kiev, and that would have been the end of the war. That's not the purpose of the war. The purpose of the war is to drain our assets away from us. That's why you see pictures of T-72 tanks. He's not using the Armada tank. Those are good, brand new tanks. Why use those? They're going to get shot full of holes anyway. Use the old Vietnam era tanks and use our most inexperienced troops so they'll get the exposure to combat.
Actually, that's what Joel cited as evidence to say, oh, Russia's not ready, China's not ready, this is a big joke.
No.
Because he said on that convoy that they sent to Kiev, the capital of Ukraine, they sent all these old rundown equipment. I had a feeling that was optics. I had a feeling that was just
Very
something else was going on, right? And you're actually filling in the pieces here. This is really fascinating for me.
So he's giving his least experienced troops combat experience using the oldest equipment he has. And what are we doing? We're shooting up all of our high-tech missiles at them. And we are running out of missiles. In fact, Ted Cruz and Rand Paul have sounded the bell. Look, we're using up all of our ammunition and giving it to Ukraine. And that, you can't go to Walmart and buy a 155 millimeter howitzer shell. Okay, these things have to be produced in lots and batches. You have to have quality control. I mean, it's a very technical process. They're not just something that shoots out of the end of a barrel and goes boom on the other end. They're very complex, and it takes time to produce these things. And we're giving all that stuff to Ukraine to shoot at Russia, and Russia's just taking it. Why would they do that? If you have been in the military, if you've been in a war, if you go to war, there's three things you're going to do first. I mean, absolutely first. You're going to cut off communications. You don't want the target to communicate with the outside world. Okay, you're going to cut off the water. You don't want people being able to replenish themselves. You want them to starve. You want them to dehydrate. You want them to be mentally unstable so you can defeat them easier. And you want to cut off the power. Well, guess what? Putin hasn't done any of that. So if he hasn't done it, then that's not the purpose. He's not going in there to take Ukraine. That's not his purpose. If he were going to take Ukraine, that would have happened on February 24th. They would have cut off the railroads. They would have cut off the highways. They would have destroyed the water systems and communications. It would have been done. But it didn't take place. It still hasn't taken place. And it's not because he's stupid. It's because, think of it this way. If you're a married man, the last thing you want somebody to do is take your wife and take her away from you, but you can hear her scream as she's being tortured and beaten. What's that going to make you do? That's going to make you do everything you can to try to overcome your adversary. So why would he cut off the communication if he wants Zelensky to communicate with the West to get them to expend all of their ammunition?
So it's a drain of resources. It's a swamp. It's a quicksand trap, is what you're saying, right?
That's correct.
And you even mentioned something also, that the machining and tooling for a lot of what we actually use in the military is done in China currently. Is that right?
That's correct. That is correct.
And on top of that, there's a rocket engine shortage. Is that
Yes,
is that also
that
something
is
that
correct.
Wow.
There is a rocket engine shortage, and they can't get parts to build more rocket engines. That'll be another 2 years.
Oh man. So
now, do you
ahead.
see why China might be locked down?
Because it hurts us more
It's
than
hurting us more than it does them. There's 21 to 23,000 ships sitting off the coast of China waiting to load and unload. 23,000. Okay, the number fluctuates. Some come and go. Some. If you look on if you go, what's his name, Monkey Works, go to his website and look at his resources. He'll show you that every Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 11 Central Time, he goes and looks at all the aircraft and all the ships around the world. And you can see it just some of the ships are red, that's a tanker, green, that's a cargo container ship, and then some of them are gray. They're just parked. If they're gray or red, they're moving, and they look like little arrows. But when they turn gray, they're parked, and they're just thousands of ships parked off the coast of China, waiting to load or unload.
So Cyrus,
there's even another purpose for that as well, but that's part of what we're going to talk about is that you can take one of these container ships and turn it into a troop ship, like what was done in World War II. The Queen Mary became a troop ship, and she carried 10,000 soldiers from the United States to Europe at a time. Okay, now imagine you've got all these container ships. There is a company called COSCO, C-O-S-C-O. And if you look at trains when they go by, you'll see a lot of containers have COSCO. That is the Chinese Overseas Shipping Company. It's owned by the People's Liberation Army, and they have container ships. Hundreds and hundreds of container ships that could be modified as troop carriers, okay, and they would be brought in to Ensenada, Mexico, just south of the United States, the largest, second largest port in Mexico, and then Vancouver, and they'll be above and below, north and south of the United States. And at that point, they can unload and begin moving troops close to the border. And I believe that in addition to that, they are also going to have troops in just outside of San Antonio, Texas.
Yeah. Why don't we, so before we segue into them, I want you to show people your map that you put together and kind of describe what we can really expect to see shortly. But in the podcast here, I have made the strong case for World War III and a preemptive nuclear strike happening next year, September timeframe. How do you feel about that? Obviously, we both, even though we respect him, we both respectfully disagree with Joel Skousen. This is going to happen a lot sooner, a lot faster. When you said this is going to happen so quickly and be so kinetic, I couldn't agree with you more. But when are you seeing as far as time frame? What are you forecasting on that?
It could be as soon as November 1st, I think. It may be much later. I say much later, months later, a few months later. But we're going into a sabbatical year, and things tend to line up with the feast days.
Right.
And so I believe that 2023, most of it will be a sabbatical year. And the spring feast coming could be a very good opportunity for something like this to happen. But theoretically, going by the cycle energy itself, I would say November timeframe. In fact, the peak of the cycle is November 1st. It could happen November 1st.
Okay, so watch out, everybody. This is why we're doing this. This is why this podcast, this platform exists, because we need to be watching and praying, but not just blindly. We need to understand that there is some intel that God is giving us through the heavens, through these cycles that have happened over and over and over again throughout history. And Cyrus, you are just, we're so blessed to have you here and just kind of giving us the heads up, because we need to watch. Remember what Yeshua told us: pray that you're counted to be worthy to escape the things that are coming on the earth. So with that said, let's just take a look at, like, how could this unfold? There's some things that you had brought to my attention. I'm like, whoa, we need to talk about this on the podcast. I'd love for you to kind of dive into that.
Let me share screen here. Okay, it takes a minute, I guess. Okay, I've got red arrows and black arrows. The black arrows represent what I believe the Chinese will do. And, this is no, secret knowledge or anything like that. I just believe it goes back to the Russian defector, Stanislav, I can't remember his name, but it was not Lunev, but it was another one. He was a KGB defector in 1977, 78, somewhere in that time frame. And he gave us the plan. And it was basically Russia, China would come together and they would attack the United States, and Russia would attack into Alaska and Canada, and China would attack the United States. Now, some of the weapons that they would have used then are obsolete, and they have much better ones now and are much further along than we are. Okay. So I believe that the Chinese will use their container ships and convert them to troop ships and bring them into Vancouver and bring them into Ensenada, Mexico. There's San Diego right here. Let's see if we can. Okay. No, well, there's San Diego, and here's Ensenada right here.
Mm-hmm.
Not very far apart. If you look, I have this arrow going over to, and another arrow going in that same direction as San Antonio, Texas. Okay. Why do I say that? It's because of that article I sent you. It appeared in Forbes magazine. A Chinese general who's a billionaire, just bought 200 square miles of Texas real estate, and it had an airstrip on it, and he's upgraded the airstrip.
Oh boy.
Okay, so we can land transport planes just outside of San Antonio, Texas, where I went through basic training at Lackland Air Force Base. Okay, so you have this huge Air Force facility. They put the two bases together, Kelly and Lackland, put them together. And anyway, that's why San Antonio's here, because this area right here where the cursor is moving is where this general has purchased this 200 square miles of Texas real estate.
Now, do you recall when that was purchased?
Last year, I believe, 2021.
Wow. So why would you purchase land in a foreign country if it's going to be totally Fukushima with EMPs? Like Joel Skousen is putting on the table, hey, yeah, it's all going to be EMP'd. Again, the evidence is to the contrary. But go ahead. Sorry, sorry, Cyrus.
Okay, now what they have to do is you've got San Diego, you've got probably one of the largest marine bases, combined naval marine bases in the United States, except for maybe Virginia. But you will have to quickly take out these military installations along the coast and the states that are occupying the coast. And I believe they'll do that with the hypersonic cruise missiles.
Hmm.
And they will probably be low-yield tactical nukes. And some of them may be armed with neutron bombs. If you're going to war with the bully on the block right now, United States, why do you care about breaking some treaty that you signed with him 40 years ago? Okay? Right. Neutron bombs kill only people. They do not destroy buildings. So if you hit the United States military facilities with neutron bombs, the people die, but you get all the equipment.
Is that true also of hydrogen? Is that true of hydrogen as well?
What, a hydrogen bomb?
Yes.
What? No, it'd be great destruction if it hits the Earth.
Okay, now, so neutron's the one that's...
If it's an air burst, like 1,600 feet or 2,000 feet, depending on the yield of the bomb, it just makes a cone of destruction down from the explosion.
Okay.
And it does minimal, very, very minimal fallout. This idea of a nuclear winter is totally false. Okay, get that out of your head. It's totally false. What will happen is you'll have 2 weeks where the radiation is really bad and you would have to stay indoors. But if you're soldiers, you're going to be wearing protective equipment anyway. But the idea here is China has to take all the military installations on the coast quickly so that they can land troops on the coast of the United States, because the troops that are represented by the black arrows are going to go up the backside of the Rocky Mountains. If China makes one point of attack, lands on the coast of California, and starts heading east, all we have to do is block the passes. That's it. Where else are they going to cross? If we block the passes, we've got them stopped on the west side of the Rockies. But it's a little bit more difficult than that. You have a coastal range. You have the Sierra Nevadas. Then you have the Rocky Mountains. So you have spaces of high mountain valleys and things of that in Utah and Colorado, which are not really mountainous, but they are 4, 5, 6,000 feet in elevation, but they're plains, prairies, deserts. But if we stop the progress on the Rocky Mountains, we can contain them and blow them up at our leisure. That's why they're going to attack Texas, Louisiana, and sweep down out of Alberta, Canada, with, I don't know how many, I would say 500,000 coming from each direction. And then they will strike Louisiana because of the Mississippi River, because if they can cut off the major crossings of the Mississippi River, then they've divided the country in half. Russia, at same time as going into Alaska and Canada, excuse me, wrong way, are going to attack the East Coast much the same way that China attacked the West Coast. They're going to hit all the military facilities. In fact, I believe Russia will hit the East Coast first, destroying Washington, D.C. and the Pentagon, because
Okay.
now nobody can warn. So how do you get your orders about where to go if the command structure is destroyed?
Right.
Okay, so some field commander somewhere will say, okay, we're being attacked here, let's go there because we can't get in touch with anybody. So there'll be people with that type of initiative, and then, you know, some of them may just stick the thumb in their mouth and suck on it. I don't know. But Russia, I believe, will take the East Coast. And if, once again, if you go watch Monkey Works, you'll see several days sub hunters are making patterns over the East Coast. Why? Because there's something out there. They know there's something out there. They can pick it up. In fact, they have a way of communicating with Russian nuclear subs, because one had parked itself right at the mouth of the Mississippi, and one of the ships ran into it.
Huh.
Okay, so that's how they knew it was there. The ship was fully loaded and was much lower. The water was much lower than they had anticipated, and it hit this nuclear sub. Luckily, it didn't destroy it or anything.
Oh my gosh.
So they're sitting there collecting intelligence, just like we did when we were monitoring them. They do it to us. So Russia will take the East Coast, maybe even part of Louisiana, and use it as a springboard into the heartland of America. But I believe that Russia is going to be limited basically to tactical nukes and this new autonomous mine, or not mine, but torpedo, I guess is a good word for it. It's a 100 megaton torpedo, and it's autonomous. It has a nuclear engine, so it doesn't ever need to refuel. So they can park it off the coast of the East Coast, and at the given moment, hit the detonate button, and boom, a massive tidal wave comes ashore and wipes out Washington, D.C.
And you believe that they're going to use these types of torpedoes that are nuclear up and down the East Coast?
I believe that probably hypersonic missiles with low yield nukes and these torpedoes, yes.
Would China do something similar in the West Coast or no?
Yes.
Okay.
It would almost be a mirror image.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. I'm just trying to process all this, Cyrus. Are any more thoughts on this map? I mean, this is you said that this was already kind of exposed and leaked by a Soviet Union defector, someone who defected to the US?
Back in the 1970s, yes.
So this
Now,
is
yeah,
this isn't a conspiracy theory. This is a conspiracy fact. It's just we don't know all the details of how they're going to do it, but we can healthily speculate, right?
that's correct. That's correct.
Wow.
Remember, their nuclear arsenal is so much more sophisticated than it was in the 1970s, and not only that, it's more sophisticated in our last missile, the MX nuclear missile, was manufactured over 20 years ago.
Huh.
Our Minuteman II and Minuteman IIIs were produced 40 years ago. And sometimes they'll try to launch one. They launch them on a regular basis, one or two a year, to make sure that the motors are still functioning and things like that. Naturally, they don't have a nuclear warhead on them, and they shoot them out into the ocean. Some of them have never cleared the silos. Okay, so our arsenal is getting old.
Wow.
And it's not functioning like it was supposed to. So they know that. And last month in June, they tested our hypersonic missile, and it failed.
Wow. Yeah, actually, I saw that article. I saw that there was a failure. It didn't launch properly from the launch pad, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. So this is kind of like, the Rocky Balboa movie, the old fighter's just old and fat and, uh, can't do what he used to and keep up with a youngster on the block. So it's the perfect time to challenge him to a fight. Except for
Right.
this one, there will be no challenge. It'll be sudden. It'll be swift. And before a lot of people know it's even happened, it's going to be over.
Huh.
All they're
It's
going
like,
to, at that point, they're just going to be mopping up. They'll be mopping up for years. There'll
wow.
be, it'll be isolated cells and bands fighting back, but the amount of damage that people will be able to do in isolation will be very minimal. They are going to attack, I believe, with over 1 million men. So we're talking hundreds of these troop ships coming to America and or Canada and Mexico, and you know, dumping 10,000 men at a time
Whew.
at these two places.
That's with how we've been essentially we've been demilitarized to a lot, like our nuclear program. We disarmed when we signed these treaties, we've basically put a gun to our own heads. And I think
Pretty much.
a lot of people don't realize that is the state of affairs with the US. Supposedly undefeatable, like, incredibly powerful military. It's not what we thought it was. And I think that's really, um, I think that's really what people are underestimating. Joel Skousen being one of them, is that this is judgment from God too. And
Oh, absolutely.
it,
Absolutely.
you remember a verse in Jeremiah? This is from Jeremiah. I have it pulled up. 37, Jeremiah 37, verses 9 and 10. This is what it says. Thus says Yehovah, do not deceive yourself, saying, the Chaldeans will surely depart from us, for they will not depart. For though you had defeated the whole army of the Chaldeans who fight against you, and there remained only wounded men among them, they would rise up, every man in his tent, and burn the city with fire. So even if the United States fought back, and let's say that they actually beat the Chinese and Russians in devastating ways, and there's just a few men left, wounded men, it says here in Jeremiah, in the southern kingdom would still be conquered and burned with fire.
Yeah,
Because
exactly.
you can't stop God's judgment. So with that being said, Cyrus, I think we should wrap it up here. I think you've given us a lot to think about. I believe, a very realistic, a very spot on, sort of analysis. And it lines up with not only the cycles we've been seeing, and you've been very accurate with your forecast. It's not only lining up with those types of things, it's lining up with prophecy. It's lining up with, I mean, we're going to be, the Western countries are going to be in slavery by 2024. I can totally see that. In
I
order for
believe
that to happen, we don't have 3 to 5 years. We don't have maybe even another year, maybe not even
it's
another
possible.
year. It's possible. So
It's possible.
I guess with that being said, what are some thoughts about, well, let me ask you this, because there's a lot of channels, there's a lot of people talking about, oh, you got to do this to prepare and this to prepare. I want to focus more on spiritual preparation. What are some of the things that you're praying right now to God that, that you wouldn't mind sharing with us? Like, how should we be praying? How should we kind of positioning ourselves spiritually during this time?
Repentance, repentance, repentance. For myself, for those around me, for our leaders, for our country. Without repentance, uh, it makes no difference. You can go to church all you want, you can sing in a choir all you want, you can preach all you want, but if you're not repenting and turning away from man's traditions and serving Jehovah like He wants to be served, it's for naught. So repentance. Uh, I would like to see people repent, and I would like to see people be spared, whether it's spared in this life or spared in the judgment. I want to see people spared, but I'd like to see them spared in this life. Is it a foregone conclusion? No, it's not. This is just a forecast, just like a weather forecast. The weather can change. The high pressure system might blow in, or a low might blow in. If enough people were to repent, uh, would Jehovah uh, delay our meeting with destiny? Possibly, possibly. What is that number of people? I don't know. You know how Abraham was there in chapter 18. Said, well, would you do it for 50? Yeah. Would you do it for 40? Yeah. And then he got down to 10, and he didn't say 9, because you got to have 10 righteous men in order to have a righteous government. That's a quorum. Okay.
Oh, wow.
So that's why he stopped at 10, because there would not have been a quorum of righteous men. So what is that quorum in a country of 330 million people? I don't know. I don't. But I know that here's, some of the things that I have to repent for. Patriotism. Okay. I used to be very patriotic. Flew the flag. I look like a vagrant, but I'm a decorated veteran. That's. But patriotism is a religion. Okay, you're being patriotic to a land and to a nation that shows absolutely no regard for Jehovah's laws. That's wrong. Okay, so my patriotism is in Jehovah. Okay, I'm going to serve him. And if he tells me to do something, I'll do it to the best of my ability. But what am I going to do for my country? I don't know. I've got to think about that, because I have to first be obedient to the Father. And if he tells me to do something, then I will. But if not, I won't. So I've got to pray for this balance between you having this inherent love of your country and being patriotic, but then this is temporary. We're going to be with the Father, then we need to be patriotic and obedient to him. So that's my first priority. And remember, there was no Pledge of Allegiance, there was any of this other stuff until FDR became president, and he wanted to have this religion basically set up to where people would repeat the Pledge of Allegiance, salute the flag, even as children, sing the songs, even as children. We did it as a whole school when I was a kid. Every Monday morning, we'd gather around a flagpole and religiously say the Pledge of Allegiance, because that's what it is. It's a false religion.
Wow. I've never thought about it that way, actually, but interestingly, the more I've drawn to the Father myself, I found that patriotism, that loyalty to something that's not God. I mean, it's not. It's slowly just faded. And we're in the New Testament, Peter tells us we are a holy nation, a royal priesthood, and he says certain things about God's people. See, so we have a constitution, we have a nation that we belong to.
That's correct.
It doesn't mean we exist within the current nation that we're in, but we are commanded to, first of all, come out of her, my people, that you do not participate in her sins and receive of her plagues.
That's
We're
correct.
told that in Revelation chapter 18. But also, we're a holy nation. So I do encourage everybody listening, start thinking about that. Start considering what Cyrus is saying and what I'm saying, that we have to show loyalty first and foremost to God, and we have to start looking at our lives. What idols, what are the things that are in between that relationship? That's and start to denounce, reject, and start to get those things out. Because are enough people going to listen to this podcast and repent? Probably not. I would love for that to happen, but probably not. So I guess what I'm saying, and we'll wrap it up here. It's just time to get serious with God, like unlike any other time in history. So Cyrus, thank you so much for spending so much time. I really do appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
Your insights are excellent. And we might have you on the show again just to share more. But I guess for now, we'll wrap it up, and we'll just be watching and waiting and seeing what unfolds next.
I agree.
Where can people find you and join your ministry? Because you teach Torah every Shabbat, every Friday. How can people find you?
We're on Zoom. We have people across the country and other continents. Our Zoom meeting is 602-773-3943. We meet on Shabbat morning at 10 a.m. Central. We break for lunch at 12. We come back at 1, and Torah in the morning and something else in the afternoon. Right now, something else is 1 Enoch. Friday evening, we meet at 6 p.m. Central. And this week, I think we're in Revelation 6. So, and it's open forum. People can ask questions, make comments. I just ask that everybody raise your hand, mute, raise your hand. I'll recognize you. And sometimes we get 5 or 6 trying to comment at one time. So it's better to do it that way. It's more orderly. But nobody's hampered. Men and women can pray. Men and women can participate. And men and women can teach. I do not believe in the misunderstanding of Shaul's writings that women are not supposed to participate. That's not what he said. Okay, that's incorrect teaching, and so women can participate.
Excellent, Cyrus. Well, is it okay if I put that information in the description?
Sure.
All right, perfect. So again, everybody, join Cyrus. Stop by, say hi, join, and start learning Torah and start learning the Bible. Not just Torah, obviously, it covers more than that. So, with that said, shalom. And we'll see you around, Cyrus. Thank you so much for joining us.
Shalom, and thank you very much.
I hope you've been blessed by today's episode. If you could give me a like, drop a comment, share this content, or give me a 5-star rating, that would be great. And it would allow more people to hear this message. Whether you're watching on video sites like Rumble, BitChute, Brighteon, or listening in on the podcast, I'd love to know your thoughts and feedback. Also, make sure to visit overcomebabylon.com for more articles, reports, and other great info that I don't always have time to cover here in the podcast. All right, that's all I have for now. I'll see you next time.